The stars were once promises. Promises of the future, of expansion, of greatness, but in ancient times. They were burning tombs, for forgotten eras. 7 great galactic civilizations waged wars so vast they reshaped constellations. Planets became debris, suns were extinguished, and the very notion of existence nearly dissolved. It was in that abyss of ruin that something improbable happened, a pact, not imposed by force, nor mediated by fragile alliances, but sealed with impossible relics, artifacts as old as time itself, carrying not just technology, but purpose. The Pact of the Seven, an interspecies treaty forged in silence, and sealed with the only promise still worth anything in that broken universe: no more war. For millennia, it worked. The galaxy, though tense, remained alive, but now, something that should never have happened, has, and amid the shards of history, an ordinary human will be forced to decide the fate of everything. Before the Pact, there was only fire. The civilizations that now dominate entire systems were once on the brink of extinction. The Sharaxx, with their mechanized armies, decimated entire worlds in the name of cybernetic supremacy. The Uroth, immortal diplomats, used temporal weapons to erase civilizations from the past and rewrite the present. The Zeloi, always distant, merely watched, as if waiting for the right moment to judge the fate of all. The war was no longer between empires, but between ideas. Existence itself had become a threat. And then came the collapse. No one knows for sure who made the first move, but 7 emissaries, one from each surviving race, were gathered in a neutral space. A place never recorded on maps, where not even light could enter without permission. There, they sealed the pact with 7 relics, artifacts that responded only to pure intentions. The technology of the relics was incomprehensible, even to Delphi engineers. Some said they were biocodes, others that they contained fragments of universal consciousness, but all agreed on one thing: if one of them was corrupted, the entire treaty would collapse. For millennia, the relics remained hidden, guarded, but never touched until now. Because one of them awakened. And this awakening was no coincidence. His name was Kelmoran, a third-class archaeologist, employee of the Terran Alliance. No military rank, no combat implants, no glory. He did not seek war. He sought history, forgotten ruins, fragments of dead languages, artifacts left behind by civilizations that chose to erase their own traces from time. But on that dead orbital station, drifting on the edges of the neutral zone, Kale found something not on any record, something that should not have been alive. Hidden in a compartment sealed by resonant dark matter was one of the original relics of the Pact, an artifact that, according to all intergalactic diplomacy academies, had never been located by any species, and yet it pulsed. Upon touching it, Kale felt something he had never felt in his excavations. It responded. Not with voice, not with image, but with memory. Images flooded his mind, not as dreams, but as memories forcibly implanted. He saw the secret meetings of the 7 emissaries, felt the fear they carried, the guilt, the desperate urgency to keep the war contained. Even at the cost of the truth, the relic had accepted him, or worse, chosen him. From that moment on, Kale was no longer an observer. He was now the bearer of a secret buried beneath layers of time, lies, and political threats. He held in his hands something that could restore peace, or ignite a conflict the galaxy had never known. The universe began whispering his name, and he felt, for the first time, that he was no longer digging up the past, he was digging up the future. But others felt the activation too, and now they would come for him. The relic Kale found was not an isolated piece. It was only one of 7, each secretly forged by different hands, under distinct philosophies, but connected by a single purpose: to prevent the extinction of the galaxy. They were not weapons, but they were not passive either. Each relic guarded undecipherable codes, fractals of knowledge stored in living quantum cores, capable of reacting to the bearer's intention. One was sensitive to truth, another to sacrifice, a third would only reveal itself before absolute forgiveness. They accepted no commands. They evaluated Dot, and what few knew, and Kale now understood in fragments, was that united, the Seven could reactivate the Pact ... or destroy it forever. But what did that exactly mean? Restoring the treaty would mean accepting that the foundations of the original agreement were never as pure as official history claimed. Some races were coerced, others bought with promises of veiled supremacy. Peace, in the end, might have been nothing more than containment disguised as harmony. Cal needed to find the other six. But he was not alone. The ancient factions began to move. The Sharaxx, who always saw the Pact as a technological chain, were preventing them from ruling the galaxy, saw the rupture as a chance for liberation. The Uroth, guardians of diplomacy, viewed the attempt to gather the relics as an assault on universal order. And the Zeloi, they merely watched, as if knowing the end even before the game began. Kale had no training, no allies, no time, but he had something no one else did. The first key, and it whispered to him. Showed visions, maps, voices, echoes of time guiding his steps to places even empires dared not explore. 7 keys. 7 proofs. But Kale felt, with every pulse of the artifact, that gathering them all ... would not bring answers. Bringing them all together would be like invoking the galaxy's own judgment. They said the Pact sealed peace. But Kale, now immersed in memories awakened by the relic, saw the truth behind the myth. The war never ended. It just changed shape. The conflict of the 7 races did not disappear. It was pushed into shadows, fought with spies, silent sabotage, diplomatic coups, civil wars masked as local rebellions. What was once mass destruction was now systemic manipulation. A fragile balance maintained by fear, not conviction. And the most terrifying part, signs were everywhere. Stars that exploded due to gravitational failure, colonies that failed due to atmospheric instability, entire cities swallowed by cosmic anomalies, lies, all of them. The war was alive, dormant, hidden, feeding on silence. The first relic allowed Kale to access hidden records, archives protected by protocols from the forgotten eras, containing unauthorized transmissions from ancient leaders who knew the truth ... and chose to bury it. But why? Because, on some level, everyone feared what would come if the Pact truly broke. The relics not only sealed peace, they also held something much worse captive, a residual echo of the primordial war. An entity, or technology, that should never have survived. Each relic was also a cell, a shackle, a seal. And Kale was now the only living being to have broken one. What else was about to awaken? The galaxy pretended to sleep. But ancestral forces, ideologies shaped by millennia of fear, and armies forged in the void were already moving. Every step Kale took was watched. Every planet he set foot on, a spark. Because the hero of peace ... might also be the herald of the new war. And maybe, this time, there would be no winners. Only ruins. They arrived without warning. 3 translucent ships, made of ghost matter, cross space as if ignoring the laws of physics, silent, imposing, unchanged by time. The Uroth. They called themselves eternal diplomats. But in the secret corridors of colonies, they were known by another name. Judges of the Void. Kale had no choice. They did not confront him with weapons. They confronted him with authority. They did not ask for explanations. They declared judgment. Inside the main ship, floating in a sphere of reverse gravity, Kale was subjected to a memory-reading ritual. Not invasive, but inescapable. The Uroth did not want answers. They wanted certainties. They saw everything. The discovery of the relic, the activation, the visions, the hidden data. And then they spoke, not with voice, but with a language made of condensed intention. The Pact was not created to keep peace. It was forged to contain what you humans would never understand. Kale demanded to know. And who broke the Pact now? The Uroth remained silent, but their eyes, if they could be called that, seemed to carry sorrow. Or perhaps fear. Finally, they said only this: the imbalance began with you. And we cannot allow the other relics to awaken. The decision was clear: procedural neutralization. Kale was to be isolated in a temporal cell, where his consciousness would be frozen until the end of the current galactic era. A sacrifice, according to them, to preserve balance. But something interrupted the sentence. The relic activated on its own, released a pulse of ancient energy, disabling the Uroth ship systems. And for a fraction of a second, Kale heard a voice that was not his own. They want to keep the seal. But the seal was corrupted long before you were born. Kale escaped, not by merit, but because something wanted him alive. And now he knew, the Uroth were not guardians of peace. They were jailers of a much deeper secret, on the threshold of the dead zone, where even stars hesitate to shine. They waited. Sharaxx. Soulless warriors, shaped by eras of war and self-replicating nanites. More machine than being, more purpose than identity. They did not live, they only obeyed. And now, Kale was their new target. The activation of the relic was detected across multiple spectra. For the Sharaxx, this was not just a threat, it was an opportunity. They did not want to preserve the Pact, they wanted to shatter it. They believed peace had stagnated evolution, that civilizations had weakened under the illusion of balance. War, to them, was the catalyst for great transformation, and the relics, ancient weapons, poorly understood, that could now reignite the true cycle of ascension. Kale did not know. He was already being tracked. While seeking shelter on an abandoned shipyard planet, the Sharaxx surrounded him with their shadow drones, silent entities fused with metal and cosmic dust. They did not attack, they only watched. But then, they spoke. Not with threats, with a proposal. Human, you carry the power. But you have no direction. Join us, release the relics. Restart the war, purify the weak. Leave only what must evolve. Kale refused. He knew something inside him was already changing since contact with the first relic. He knew surrendering was not just betraying peace. It was betraying what little remained of himself. Then, the ambush began. The planet's structures crumbled. Nanites infiltrated everything: air, soil, flesh. But before the Sharaxx could capture him, the second relic activated. An ancient repulsion field rose around Kale. And, for the second time, he heard a voice: they want war. But you may be the rupture. Kale survived. He escaped. But now, the Sharaxx knew his trail, and the galaxy would no longer allow him to hide. They never interfere. At least, that's what the legends say. The Zeloi have no armies, they claim, no territories. They do not engage in treaties. They observe, beings of fractal light, with bodies vibrating at multiple frequencies of reality. The Zeloi are present in every corner of the galaxy, yet no one sees them. They do not speak, they do not act, they only judge, and Kale felt it. During a silent crossing through an abandoned binary system, he saw them for the first time. Floating above real space, like reflections trapped between the beats of time, humanoid shapes, but blurred, eyes that were nowhere, yet saw everything. Kale knew it was a test. The third relic, now fused to his wrist like a bracelet of petrified energy, began to react. It warmed as the Zeloi approached, as if recognizing their creators or their jailers. They did not attack him, but they placed him before visions, thousands of possibilities, millions of outcomes. In one, Kale handed over the relics, and the galaxy burned. In another, he destroyed them, and the galaxy slowly died. But there was a third, the denied choice. The future where he refused to follow any pre-written path. And, on that line, the Zeloi withdrew. There were no words, only a vibration. A fragment of consciousness left behind. Kale understood. The Zeloi were not neutral. They were silent judges of something far greater than a war. They tested, weighed, waited because perhaps, behind the relics, the Pact, and everything about to collapse, there was a hidden code, waiting for the one being who would dare to break the rules. And that being could be him. Not all truths were forgotten. Some were buried deeply after escaping the reach of the Sharaxx and the silent judgment of the Zeloi. Kale followed a whisper, a cryptic echo the third relic had released. Coordinates floating among ancient signals, hidden beneath the very layers of the Pact structure. His destination, Varnal, a dead moon without atmosphere, orbiting a planet destroyed before even the Age of Light. There, buried beneath the remains of fossilized civilizations, rested the dark archive of origin. It was not just a database. It was a mausoleum of forbidden knowledge, locked behind 7 layers of codes, one for each race of the Pact. But Kale now carried 3, and that was enough to open the breach. What he found was not history. It was accusations. The 7 Pact was not a peace agreement. It was a pact of containment. The relics did not seal alliances. They sealed a common enemy, a being or entity that could not be destroyed, only put to sleep. And the 7 races, in desperation, divided the prison into fragments. Each relic, a lock, each race, a sentinel. But over millennia, the truth was erased. And now, someone, or something, was manipulating events to undo the seals. Kale did not know he was the catalyst or the vessel, but when he touched the archive's final memory, he saw something that froze him. His own face, at the center of the last projection, with eyes that were no longer his own, and a single phrase, marked in all extinct languages: "The bearer does not choose. The bearer is chosen." The echo of the past left no doubt. Kale was at the center of something far older than time itself. And now, there was no turning back. Everything that kept the universe apart began to fail. The neutral zones between systems, once protected by stabilizing gravitational fields, collapsed. Interdimensional portals, sealed for millennia, opened for moments. Entire planets vanished in silence, and the sensors of the Stellar Council detected the impossible. Reality was tearing apart. Kale felt the effects even before instruments confirmed. With each relic activated, the space around him became less consistent. Stars pulsed out of rhythm. Places seemed to repeat fragments of time, like a scratched record of the cosmos itself. The galaxy was breaking, and it was not time's fault. It was something deeper. As if the universe was preparing to let something out, the Uroth tried to intervene diplomatically, sending holographic emissaries with warnings about irreversible dimensional ruptures. The Sharaxx advanced with armed fleets, willing to destroy entire systems to contain the threat. And the Vec, those who had remained silent, began merging with the gravitational currents around the breaches. Kale was no longer just a fugitive. He was the point of instability. With every step, the relics pulsed stronger. With every choice, realities intertwined. And then came the final confirmation. The barriers between the now and the never were breaking. Voices echoed from unlived futures. Images projected possibilities where Kale did not exist, or where he had already become something beyond any known definition. The Pact no longer held. And if no new decision was made soon, what would come would belong to no known world. Everything led here. A human of ordinary past, carrying in his hands the fate of entire civilizations, and perhaps of all known reality. Kale stood before the central structure of the Pact, a core of condensed energy inside an ancient satellite, hidden on the edges of the galaxy, where time barely exists. The 7 relics now pulsed in sync, like hearts resonating a single question: will you activate? But activation did not mean restoring peace. It meant sealing, again, a truth that had already been freed. It meant choosing to ignore, to forget, to prevent the galaxy from Knowing what really happened millennia ago, destroying the relics, was not a solution either. The breaches were already open, the universe had already felt it. The sleeping one was already waking, and Kale knew there was no containing it with lies anymore. Then he understood the bearer's true role, not to lead, not to win, but to reveal. Kale took the third way, a choice that did not exist in the calculations of the races, nor in the Zeloi's predictions. He synchronized the relics. But instead of activating the original protocol, he fused them to the core of his own consciousness. The Pact would not be restored. It would be rewritten based not on fear, but on understanding, not on control, but on free will, and by doing so, a silent wave swept the cosmos. The breaches ceased. Realities stabilized, but something was different. Kale was no longer just a man. He had become the guardian of forgotten truth, a beacon in the void, not of power, but of memory. Because sometimes, the only way to prevent repetition is to remember what was hidden. And the galaxy, at last, began to listen again.